She escaped a toxic love that nearly destroyed her, walking away from a life built on lies. But the lonely billionaire she met at a bar made her question everything. The rain beat down on the windshield of Ella Montgomery's car, a storm mirroring the chaos that had just erupted in her life. She'd spent 3 years wrapped up in a man who made her feel invisible. Sean. Every day had been a battle, not just with him, but with herself. Could she keep holding on to a love that had turned toxic? Or was she already too far gone to ever escape? Tonight, the decision had been made for her. As she sat in the driver's seat of her car, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass, Ella's phone buzzed again, her ex's name flashing across the screen. "You'll never survive without me, Ella. You're nothing without me." This time, she didn't even look at the message. She knew his words by heart, the lies, the manipulations, the promises of reconciliation that never came. No more, she thought, gripping the steering wheel tightly. For years, Sean had convinced her that her dreams were foolish. Her friends had turned their backs on her, and her family couldn't understand why she stayed. He'd built a world for her, small and suffocating, where she could barely breathe. But tonight, she made a vow to herself. "I'm not going back." She threw the phone into the passenger seat and opened the car door, feeling the sting of cold rain on her skin. She had nowhere to go except into the unknown. That was how she found herself stepping into the Vintage, a bar she had passed by 100 times but never dared to enter. The quiet atmosphere was a sharp contrast to the storm outside. The bar, with its old brick walls, vintage photographs, and the faint smell of whiskey and wood, offered a strange sense of solace. The perfect place to forget the chaos of her past and just breathe. As she walked in, her eyes landed on the bar at the far end of the room, where a man sat alone. He looked just as heavy with his own burdens as she felt with hers. His broad shoulders were slumped forward, his fingers wrapped around a glass of whiskey, his face drawn with the weight of untold stories. She noticed his expensive suit, the way he carried himself with an air of quiet authority. Yet there was something in his eyes, something almost vulnerable. Ella slid onto a stool, dropped her purse on the counter, and caught the bartender's eye. "Red wine," she said, her voice hoarse from the tears she had long since stopped crying. The bartender poured the wine, her understanding gaze softening Ella's edges. "You look like you need something strong," she remarked knowingly. Ella smiled faintly, wrapping her hands around the glass. She didn't feel strong, but she was here. And for the first time in a long while, that was enough. That's when the man's voice cut through the quiet murmur of the bar. "You should dry off. You're not fine." Ella looked up, surprised to find him watching her intently. There was something in the way he spoke, not just concerned, but empathetic. He wasn't just another stranger making small talk. This man understood something she couldn't name. "I'm fine," Ella responded automatically, though the lie felt strange in her mouth. She'd spent 3 years telling herself she was fine when she wasn't. But now, with the rain soaking her clothes and a whole new world unfolding in front of her, she was ready to stop lying. "Actually, I'm freezing and probably catching pneumonia. But at least I'm free." The man raised an eyebrow slightly, as if he understood exactly what she meant. He stood, grabbed a jacket from the back of his chair, and walked over to her. Ella couldn't help but notice how effortlessly he moved, confident, yet with a quiet humility that intrigued her. He extended the jacket to her, and Ella hesitated. It was far too nice, the kind of thing she couldn't even dream of owning. But something about his kindness, the way he held himself, made her want to accept. "I can't take your jacket," she said, the words feeling foreign as they left her mouth. "You need it," he replied simply. "I'll be fine." Ella took the jacket, slipping it on, the warmth from his body still lingering in the fabric. It smelled like expensive cologne and something deeper, maybe hope. She looked up at him, realizing she hadn't truly seen anyone in a long time. Not the way she was seeing him now. "You look like you're having a rough night too," she said, her voice almost too soft. But the connection between them was unmistakable. He laughed, though it was hollow. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone else having one," she answered, surprising herself with the honesty in her words. He extended his hand. "Logan. Logan Davis." Ella hesitated only for a moment before shaking his hand. There was a jolt of unexpected electricity that passed between them. Logan's hand was warm, strong, and the connection lingered just a second too long. "I'm Ella Montgomery," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mind if I join you?" Logan asked, his voice low, filled with the kind of quiet desperation she could relate to. Ella gestured to the seat next to her. "Be my guest." As Logan settled into the chair beside her, the weight of his presence felt strangely comforting. Ella's eyes never left him. Maybe he wasn't the answer to all her problems. But tonight, his company was a kind of escape she wasn't ready to let go of just yet. If you believe everyone deserves to be treated with respect and that no one should ever be manipulated or controlled in the name of love, hit subscribe and like this video. Only the haters and manipulators would ignore it. Comment, "I choose freedom" if you stand against toxic love and want to see Ella's journey unfold. As they continued to sit in silence, nursing their drinks, the weight of the past didn't feel so heavy anymore. Ella couldn't help but wonder how a man like Logan, with all his success, could be sitting here just as broken as she was. But before she could voice any of these thoughts, Logan spoke again, and his words unlocked something in her chest. It wasn't just small talk. It was the beginning of a conversation that would change both of their lives forever. It wasn't just small talk. It was the beginning of a conversation that would change both of their lives forever. The words came slowly at first, tentative, like two strangers dipping their toes in the water, unsure of the depths beneath. But as the minutes passed, the dam that Ella had carefully built around her heart began to crack, little by little. Logan sat next to her at the bar, his whiskey forgotten in front of him, his gaze steady but warm. The atmosphere around them felt more intimate than it had any right to be. The low hum of jazz mixed with the murmur of soft voices from the other patrons. But for the first time in a long time, Ella felt like she could breathe. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool air from the open window against her skin, grounding herself. She hadn't meant to speak about Sean, hadn't meant to relive the past she was still trying to escape. But there was something in Logan's eyes, something that made her feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. She paused, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. "I don't even know where to begin." Logan leaned in slightly, his voice quiet. "You don't have to say anything you're not ready to. But if you want to, I'm listening." Ella closed her eyes for a moment, gathering the courage to dive into the words that had been choking her for so long. The weight of them had always felt unbearable, like an anchor around her heart. But sitting here with Logan, his calm demeanor somehow making her feel less alone, it didn't seem so impossible anymore. "I was with someone for 3 years," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "His name was Sean. I thought I loved him. I thought he loved me. But the more I gave, the more he took. And one day, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself anymore. I had become someone who was smaller, quieter, who didn't dare to dream. He made sure of that. Logan's expression softened, his brow furrowing slightly as he listened intently. She could see the faintest flicker of empathy in his eyes, as if he understood the suffocating nature of her words. She took a long sip of her wine, her hands shaking slightly. I don't know when it started. At first, everything was perfect. He was charming, funny, and I felt like he cared. But slowly, everything I did seemed to upset him. My friends, my family, they didn't understand him. They said I was changing, but I didn't see it. And I thought that maybe if I just tried harder, he'd notice me again. But it never happened. He told me I was lucky to have him, that no one else would ever want me. And I started to believe him. She paused, her voice trembling now. It was all coming out faster than she'd expected, the words rushing out as if they were finally free after years of being trapped. She looked down at her hands, unable to meet his gaze for a moment. I couldn't breathe anymore, Logan. I couldn't even remember the last time I felt like me. So, I left. The silence between them felt like a fragile thing, as if the air around them was thick with the weight of what she had just shared. Logan didn't speak for a moment, his eyes searching her face, as if weighing her words. Finally, he leaned back slightly, his gaze intense but gentle. Ella, he said softly, I can't imagine what that must have been like. To feel like you were losing yourself and not know how to stop it. She nodded, swallowing hard. It was like he erased me, like I was just a shell of the person I used to be. And I let it happen. I let it happen because I thought I was supposed to love him, to make things work. But when I walked away, it was like I could finally breathe again. I didn't know who I was anymore, but I knew I wasn't going back. Logan's expression remained steady, but something in his eyes flickered, an understanding, maybe even a kind of recognition. You didn't just leave a man, Ella. You left a version of yourself that you thought you had to be. And now, you're trying to find your way back to who you really are. Ella looked up at him, surprised by how well he seemed to understand. Her chest tightened, but in a way that wasn't painful, more like a weight lifting. Do you really think I can? She asked, her voice raw. Do you think I can actually find myself again? Without the baggage of everything that came before? Logan took a slow sip of his whiskey, his eyes not leaving hers. I think you already have. You're sitting here with me, aren't you? You're breathing. That's a good start. A small laugh escaped her, a sound she hadn't made in what felt like forever. She hadn't expected to feel lighter after saying all that. But there was a strange sense of relief in admitting it out loud, in sharing the pieces of herself she had buried for so long. Logan gave her a small smile, his eyes soft. You've been through a lot, and I can't pretend to know exactly what that feels like, but I do know about betrayal. I know what it's like to have someone you trust stab you in the back. Ella raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Logan shifted slightly in his seat, his jaw tightening for a brief moment before he relaxed. I trusted someone completely, a best friend. He was like a brother to me. And then, one day, I found out he was plotting to destroy everything I built. Took money from my company, lied to me for 2 years. All the while he was sitting at my dinner table, attending my family's events, being part of my life, And when I found out, it was like the world just shattered. Ella could see the pain in his eyes, a depth of emotion she hadn't expected to see from someone who seemed so composed. "I'm sorry, Logan. That sounds awful." He gave a slight shake of his head, as if to dismiss it. It was. But what hurt the most wasn't the money or the betrayal. It was that I didn't see it coming. He was supposed to be someone I could trust. And when that trust was broken, I felt like I lost part of myself too. Ella looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. The man sitting next to her wasn't just a lonely billionaire. He was someone who had been burned by those he loved, just as she had. His vulnerability made him more real to her than any amount of wealth or success ever could. "I get it now," she said softly. "It's not just about the betrayal. It's about losing yourself in someone else's lies. And it's so hard to trust again." Logan nodded, his expression serious. "Exactly. But Ella, the difference between us and the people who hurt us is that we're still here. We're still fighting for ourselves, even when everything's fallen apart." She let his words sink in, feeling a warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time in a long time, Ella felt like she wasn't alone in this, like she wasn't the only one who had been broken, who had to rebuild from scratch. "Logan?" she began, her voice hesitant. "I don't know what this is, but I feel like I've known you forever." Logan smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I feel the same way. It's funny, isn't it? How life has a way of bringing people together when they need it most." "I guess," Ella said, looking down at her wineglass. "I wasn't expecting to find comfort in a stranger tonight. But here we are." "Stranger," he repeated with a chuckle. "I think we can drop that word after all this." Ella smiled, and for the first time since walking away from her past, she felt a flicker of something that wasn't fear. Something like hope. "So," Logan said, standing up and offering her a hand, "how about we continue this conversation over dinner? I don't know about you, but I could use something other than whiskey to sober up." Ella hesitated, her mind racing with 1,000 reasons to say no. But something in her heart told her this was different. She had the chance to start over, to trust again, and maybe, just maybe, this was the right way to begin. "Dinner sounds good," she said with a smile, her hand slipping into his. As they walked out of the bar together, their conversation flowing effortlessly, Ella realized she had no idea what the future held. But for the first time in years, it didn't feel as scary as it used to. Ella had always imagined that her life would be different, that one day, when she walked away from everything that had suffocated her, she would find the strength to stand on her own, without needing anyone to lean on. But as the days stretched into a week since she'd met Logan, she realized that strength didn't come from isolation. It came from understanding, from connection. The first few days after their dinner at the Vintage felt like a blur of emotions and new experiences. Ella had never felt so seen in her life. Logan had a way of listening that was rare, as though every word she spoke mattered. They spent hours talking, and sometimes just sitting in silence, sharing space, sharing thoughts. What began as small talk grew into deeper conversations, ones that touched on everything from their childhoods to the wounds they had both carried with them for so long. It wasn't just Logan's wealth that had drawn her in, though the luxurious life he led was undeniable. It was the way he was able to talk so openly about the struggles that came with it. Ella learned about his business empire, how he had built it from the ground up after his father's passing, how hard he had fought to create something meaningful. Yet, despite all his achievements, It was clear that success hadn't come without its costs. "I spend so much time at work," Logan had said one evening, his voice quiet, contemplative. "I've sacrificed relationships, friendships, even family. I've been so focused on building this empire that I forgot what it means to just live." Ella had listened intently, her wineglass forgotten in front of her as she observed him. Logan, the billionaire, seemed to have it all. Yet there was a void in him, a loneliness she recognized all too well. She could understand the weight of living a life surrounded by people, but still feeling isolated. She had been there herself, stuck in a relationship where she felt invisible. And here was Logan, trapped in a different kind of isolation. "You can't buy time," Ella had said softly, almost to herself. "And you can't buy real connections, no matter how much money you have." Logan had smiled, a tired smile, but a genuine one. "I've learned that the hard way. You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have someone to share it with, what's the point?" As they spent more time together, Ella began to see beyond the polished exterior of Logan's life. She saw the man who had been hurt, who had lost trust in others, who had been burned by those he had loved. And, in some strange way, she began to recognize the same scars in herself. The scars that told her she couldn't trust easily, that love was something to be cautious about, that relationships were a risk. Yet, with Logan, she found herself wanting to take that risk. It was a Thursday afternoon when Logan suggested something unexpected. "You need a break," he said, his voice steady as they sat in the small cafe Logan frequented for their afternoon coffee. "I can see it in your eyes. You're still carrying so much from your past. The weight of it is still there." Ella set her cup down, her eyes meeting his. "I'm fine," she said reflexively. The same words she had used for years when she didn't know how to admit the truth. But this time she wasn't sure it was a lie. "You don't have to be fine," Logan replied gently. "No one expects you to have it all together. I know what it's like to feel like you're constantly on the edge of breaking, trying to hold it all together. Maybe it's time you took a few days to just breathe." Ella felt the vulnerability in his words, the sincerity that made her feel both safe and exposed at the same time. She hadn't realized how much she needed to breathe until Logan put it into words. The thought of escaping the chaos, even for a short time, sounded incredibly tempting. "I don't know," she began, unsure. "Come to my downtown property," he offered. "It's not much. Just a quiet place where you can unwind. No work, no pressure. Just time to yourself. Think of it as a gift from me. No strings attached." Ella looked at him, studying the earnestness in his eyes. There was something in his gaze that told her he wasn't offering this out of obligation. He genuinely wanted to help her. He saw her struggle, saw the way she held herself back, and wanted to give her a chance to let go. A part of her hesitated. She wasn't sure if she was ready to take that kind of step with him, even if it was just for a few days. But then she realized that she had spent too much of her life second-guessing herself, questioning every decision, every move. Maybe it was time to trust her instincts and let herself feel something different. "Okay," she said, her voice quieter than she intended. "I'll come." The drive to Logan's downtown property was a short one, and as the city skyline stretched before her, Ella felt a flutter of excitement mixed with anxiety. It was a gorgeous apartment, perched high above the city, with windows that offered sweeping views of the skyline and the river. The space was sleek, modern, and tastefully decorated, but there was a calmness to it that made Ella feel at ease. It was exactly what she needed. A retreat from the world she had left behind. Logan showed her around the apartment, offering her the guest room and explaining that everything she might need was available. But Ella barely heard him. She was too busy taking in the tranquility of the space, the silence that seemed to be the exact opposite of the chaos she had come from. "This is nice," she said softly, looking out over the city. Logan gave her a warm smile. "I'm glad you like it. It's been my safe place for a while. Now I'm just hoping it'll be yours too. You can stay as long as you need." Ella nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over her. She hadn't realized how much she needed to just be still, to stop running from her past. But in that moment, standing in Logan's apartment, it felt like a fresh start, a new chapter. They spent the evening talking, laughing, and getting to know each other even better. Logan's vulnerability was evident, his willingness to open up about his struggles with trust and his fears about relationships. As the night wore on, Ella found herself sharing more than she had expected. She spoke about her childhood, her dreams before Sean had convinced her that they were foolish, and how she had almost lost herself completely. By the time they sat down to a simple dinner Logan had prepared, Ella felt a sense of calm she hadn't known in years. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't worrying about her next move or wondering if she was doing the right thing. She was simply present, and for that moment, it felt enough. As the evening came to an end, Ella found herself wondering if she was moving too fast. She hadn't planned for any of this. Meeting Logan, spending time with him, letting herself feel things she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. But one thing was clear. For the first time since she left Sean, Ella was willing to explore what the future could hold. With Logan. The first few days at Logan's downtown property felt like a dream. The quiet, the luxury, the time to simply exist without the weight of the world pressing down on her. It was everything Ella had needed. The apartment was everything she imagined it would be. Sleek, modern, filled with natural light that bathed the space in a soft golden glow during the day. But as the hours passed, the stillness began to feel unsettling. For the first time in a long time, Ella was forced to look at herself without the distractions of Sean's voice, the noise of her old life. She had always been so consumed by the need to please others, to fix everything that was broken, that she never gave herself the time to heal. Now, here, in the calm, she had to face the parts of herself she'd buried. The insecurities, the fears, the doubts that had held her captive for so long. Ella sat on the plush sofa, her laptop open, but her mind miles away. Her fingers hovered over the keys, but she couldn't bring herself to type. The marketing business idea she'd always dreamed of starting now seemed like an insurmountable mountain. What if she failed? What if she wasn't good enough? She'd spent years working for someone else's dream, Sean's dream. And now, standing on the edge of her own future, the fear of failure gripped her. What if she was just as incapable as he'd made her feel? As these thoughts swirled in her mind, the soft ping of her phone interrupted the silence. The message, as if summoned by her very doubts, was from a name she'd hoped she'd never hear again. Derek. Her heart clenched in her chest. Derek was a mutual acquaintance of Sean's, someone who had always been in their orbit. He was the type of man who was always looking for someone to manipulate, someone to control. Ella hesitated for a moment, staring at the message. She knew she shouldn't engage, that she shouldn't allow his toxicity back into her life, but her fingers were already typing before she could stop herself. "How are you doing? You left pretty suddenly. Hope you're not regretting it." Her breath caught in her throat. The words were casual, but she knew the message behind them all too well. Derek had always been adept at planting seeds of doubt in her mind, making her feel like the world was better off without her. Ella stared at the message, her mind racing. And before she could stop herself, her phone buzzed again. "You're not with that Logan guy, are you? I wouldn't trust him if I were you. He's just another man looking to control you." Ella froze, her stomach dropping at the words. Her hand shook as she held the phone. The seed of doubt Derek had planted in her mind began to grow. She thought she was past this. She thought she was strong enough to move on. But hearing those words, the same ones Sean used to tell her, made everything feel uncertain again. She pushed the phone away, standing up and pacing the room. Her breath quickened and her chest tightened. She thought she had found something real with Logan. He had been nothing but kind to her, offering her space, encouraging her to pursue her dreams. But now, in the silence of the apartment, with Derek's message echoing in her mind, her old fears resurfaced. Was Logan really different from Sean? Was he just another man trying to control her? The idea that she might be walking down the same path, that she was making the same mistake again, filled her with dread. Ella needed answers. She couldn't let this uncertainty sit in her chest any longer. She needed to confront Logan about her fears, about the doubts that were creeping back in, no matter how much she wanted to believe in their connection. The sound of the front door clicking open snapped Ella from her spiraling thoughts. She wiped her hands on her jeans, trying to compose herself before Logan walked in. Logan appeared in the doorway, a briefcase in hand, looking as effortlessly put together as always. He had a way of walking into a room that seemed to command attention without trying. But today, Ella noticed the weariness in his eyes. He seemed distracted, weighed down by something she couldn't place. "Hey," he greeted her with a soft smile, setting down his briefcase. "How was your day?" Ella forced a smile, but the words stuck in her throat. She couldn't lie to him. Not about this. Not anymore. "Logan, can we talk?" Logan's brow furrowed slightly, his eyes scanning her face as if looking for an answer to a question he hadn't yet asked. "Of course. What's going on?" She swallowed hard, the doubt she had been carrying pressing against her chest. "I don't know if I can do this," she said, her voice shaking slightly. He tilted his head, his expression softening with concern. "Do what?" "Move on. Trust again. Not after everything I've been through," she admitted, her voice breaking. I've been hearing things. People telling me not to trust you. That you're just like him." Logan's eyes darkened, his lips pressing together in a tight line. For a moment there was silence between them, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Then he took a deep breath and stepped closer to her. "You think I'm like him?" His voice was calm, but there was a vulnerability to it that she hadn't expected. "Ella, I'm not here to control you. I'm not here to manipulate you. You've been through too much for that." Ella's eyes searched his face, trying to read him, to find the truth. "Then why does it feel like you're offering me something? Something I'm not sure I'm ready to take?" Logan didn't back away from her gaze. He reached out, gently cupping her face in his hand. "Because you're scared, Ella. You're scared to let anyone in, and I get it. I've been there. But I'm not him. I'm not here to take anything from you. I just want to be here for you. To help you, if you'll let me." Ella closed her eyes, her breath catching. She had wanted to believe him, to trust him, but the fear was so ingrained in her that it was hard to let go of it. Every part of her wanted to push him away, to retreat back into the walls she had so carefully built. But part of her, somewhere deep inside, wanted to believe in him, to believe in them. "I don't know how to do this, Logan. I don't know how to trust anyone again." Logan's voice softened, the warmth in it making her heart ache. "You don't have to figure it all out at once. We'll take it one step at a time. I'm not going anywhere." Ella took a shaky breath, his words washing over her. For a moment, she allowed herself to lean into him, the comfort of his presence soothing the rawness of her doubts. Maybe she was moving too fast. Maybe she didn't have all the answers. But for the first time, she wasn't completely alone in her uncertainty. And that made all the difference. "I just need some time," she whispered, looking up at him. "I need to figure out if I can do this." Logan nodded slowly, his eyes filled with understanding. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going to rush you, Ella. I'm here, no matter what." Ella sat on the couch later that evening, her thoughts swirling in a fog. Part of her wanted to believe Logan, to let go of her fears and take that leap. But the scars from her past, her years with Sean, felt so fresh, so close to the surface. She wanted to trust him. She did. But her heart, her instincts, were still too afraid as she stared out the window at the lights of the city below. A new kind of fear settled in her chest, fear that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't ready for this new beginning. Not yet. Ella knew one thing for certain. She was standing at a crossroads. And as much as she wanted to walk forward into this new possibility with Logan, her past was still holding her back. Could she let go of her doubts and trust again? Or would she push him away and retreat into the safety of her old life? The soft hum of city life outside Logan's downtown apartment seemed distant, like a world she didn't belong to anymore. Ella had spent the past few days trying to convince herself that the uncertainty she felt about Logan was just her own fears, her past still lingering in the corners of her heart. But when her phone rang that afternoon, the call shattered the fragile calm she had worked so hard to build. She didn't recognize the number, but the name that flashed across the screen stopped her heart. Rebecca. Her first instinct was to ignore it, to let it go to voicemail. She had nothing to say to Logan's ex-fiancée. She had spent enough of her life tangled in other people's drama, and she certainly wasn't about to let Rebecca drag her into it now. But something, curiosity maybe, compelled her to answer. "Hello?" Ella's voice was cautious, tight with the anxiety that always seemed to accompany these kinds of calls. "Ella, I'm so sorry to bother you," came Rebecca's voice, sweet but with a hint of something else, something Ella couldn't quite place. "But I thought you should know a few things about Logan, things he probably didn't tell you." Ella's stomach twisted. "Things he didn't tell me?" Rebecca continued, her tone laced with concern. Or was it something more? "I know you're probably feeling confused right now, and I get that. Logan can be very convincing, but you should know that he's not exactly what he seems. He's controlling, Ella. I know that better than anyone." Ella's breath hitched in her chest. "What are you talking about?" "I'm just saying," Rebecca replied, her voice lowering, "that maybe you're not seeing the full picture. Logan's had a lot of issues with controlling people, especially in relationships. He's used his power, his wealth, to manipulate situations. And now he's trying to do the same with you. You should be careful." Ella felt her pulse quicken. The words sounded too familiar, too much like the things Sean used to say to her, the doubts he planted in her mind. Rebecca's next words hit harder than Ella expected. "Trust me. I've been there, Ella. He doesn't change. He'll tell you everything you want to hear. make you feel special, make you feel like you're the one he's been waiting for. But in the end, he'll pull the same tricks on you he pulled on me. And you'll end up exactly where I am, broken and alone. The words rang in her ears, louder than they should have. She clenched her fists, a familiar unease crawling up her spine. The doubts that had been festering for days bubbled to the surface, and for the first time since meeting Logan, Ella felt her trust in him crack. Rebecca continued, almost too sweetly. Just be careful, Ella. I'm only looking out for you. Ella couldn't shake the feeling that there was more behind Rebecca's words than concern. A sharp pang of doubt gnawed at her, and she felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. Was she right? Was Logan just like Sean, playing another game? Logan had invited Ella to join him for dinner that evening, and she had reluctantly agreed, though her mind was racing. Every step she took toward the dinner table seemed heavier than the last. She couldn't forget Rebecca's words, couldn't erase them from her mind, no matter how hard she tried. As she sat across from him at the small candlelit table, the tension between them was palpable. Logan had no idea what was going on in her mind. She had barely spoken since they sat down, her fork scraping against her plate in a rhythm that didn't match her usual energy. Logan watched her carefully, his brow furrowing slightly. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. "You seem distant tonight." Ella stared at her plate, trying to find the right words. But everything inside her felt jumbled. Her doubts, her fears, her past. All of it seemed to collide into one overwhelming wave. The last thing she wanted to do was confront him, to ask the questions she had been avoiding. But tonight, she couldn't pretend anymore. "No, Logan," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not okay." Logan's gaze softened, his expression turning serious. He put down his fork, giving her his full attention. "Ella, talk to me. What's going on?" Ella took a deep breath, her hands trembling as they gripped her glass. She needed to know the truth. She needed to hear him say it. "Rebecca called me today." The mention of his ex-fiancée made Logan's jaw tighten slightly. His eyes shifted, and for the first time since Ella had met him, she saw a flicker of something other than calm and control. "She told me things," Ella continued, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "Things about you. About how you can be manipulative, controlling. That you use your wealth to control people, to get what you want. She told me you were the same as Sean. That you'd do the same things to me that he did." Logan went still. His eyes darkened, his hand tightening around his glass. But there was no anger in his expression, only a deep, heavy sadness. "Ella," his voice was low, his tone filled with regret. "I've never wanted to hurt you. And I'm sorry if you feel like I've given you any reason to believe those things." Ella shook her head, her breath catching. "But what am I supposed to believe, Logan?" "Everything she said? It sounds like what Sean used to say to me. That I wasn't enough. That I couldn't trust anyone but him. That no one else would ever want me. And now, I'm hearing the same things from Rebecca." Logan's face softened, and he leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "I understand why you're scared. I know you've been hurt, Ella. But I'm not him. And I'm not Rebecca's version of me." For a moment there was silence between them. Ella could feel the weight of his words, but her heart was still heavy with doubt. Logan's expression tightened with emotion as he spoke again. "Ella, I've been through something very similar. I don't talk about it much, But I was engaged once. I loved her. I thought she loved me. But she betrayed me in the worst way possible. And the pain of losing her, of realizing that everything I thought I knew about love was a lie, has stuck with me." Ella's eyes widened, her heart aching as she listened. She had never seen Logan so vulnerable before, and the rawness of his confession made her chest tighten. "I'm sorry," he continued, his voice full of regret. "I pushed people away. I didn't trust anyone, and I'm afraid that I've been closed off for too long, that I've let my fears get in the way of something that could be real." Ella's eyes welled with tears. The man sitting across from her, the billionaire with the sharp suits and the confident smile, was just as broken as she was. He had his own scars, his own wounds that hadn't healed. And yet, he was still here, still offering her a chance at something more. "I'm not like Sean," Logan said softly. "And I'm not like Rebecca either. I want to show you that. But I need you to trust me, Ella. Please. I need you to trust that I'm not here to control you. I'm here because I care about you." Ella stared at him, the weight of his words pressing down on her. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. But the doubts were still there. The fear still held her in place. "I don't know if I can trust anyone anymore," she whispered. Logan's eyes softened with understanding. "I won't rush you, Ella. I know it's not easy, but if you want to take things slow, I'll be here. No pressure, no control, just me. And whatever you decide." Ella nodded slowly, her heart still heavy, but with a sense of clarity she hadn't felt before. She wasn't ready to give him all of her trust, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, she could start to believe in him. Ella knew she was standing on the edge. Her fears had been voiced, and Logan had offered her a lifeline, a way forward if she was willing to take it. But as she sat there, looking at him, she couldn't shake the feeling that trusting him would be the hardest thing she'd ever done. Could she truly let go of her past and embrace a future with Logan? The days after the confrontation with Logan were filled with an odd sense of peace, though it was still fragile. Ella had spent years running from the weight of her past, from the ghosts of manipulative words and broken promises. But somehow, as the days passed in Logan's downtown apartment, surrounded by the city's pulse and the quiet support he offered, she began to feel a shift, like a door opening into something she hadn't realized she was capable of. Healing. It wasn't that the doubts and fears had disappeared completely, but they had quieted. When she woke up in the morning, the anxiety in her chest wasn't as suffocating as it had been before. There was still pain, of course, but there was also something new. Something like hope. The first morning after their emotional confrontation, Logan made her coffee. He didn't ask for anything in return, didn't expect a confession or a declaration. He simply made the coffee, poured it for her, and handed it to her with a quiet smile that she had come to treasure. It was the little things, she realized, that made her feel safe. His steadiness, his patience, his lack of expectation. They spent the following days together, exploring Charleston, an easy way to let their connection grow without the weight of deep conversations hanging over them. The city, with its old streets, moss-covered trees, and quiet history, felt like a gentle backdrop to their budding relationship. One afternoon, they took a long walk along the water, watching the boats drift lazily by as the sun dipped lower into the sky, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Logan stayed a step behind her, letting her lead. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Ella felt free. Free of the need to prove herself. free of the chains of the past. As they walked, they shared stories of their lives, small details that didn't mean much, but somehow meant everything. Ella laughed as she told him about the first time she had tried to make a homemade pie, only to burn it so badly that even her dog wouldn't touch it. Logan laughed with her, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners as he took in her words. She had forgotten what it felt like to share such simple moments, to let herself be so open. Later that week, as they wandered through Charleston's historic district, with its cobblestone streets and charming row houses, Ella felt a warmth spreading through her chest. The city felt alive, and for the first time, it felt like she was living again, not just existing. Logan held her hand as they strolled through the squares, talking about the architecture, about the people who had lived there long before them. As they paused near the water, overlooking the famous Battery Promenade, Logan's voice broke the comfortable silence between them. "You know, I think the best thing about being here with you is that you remind me what it feels like to live without fear. I don't have to think about the next step or guard myself against every possible outcome. With you, I just get to be." Ella turned to him, her heart thudding in her chest. There was sincerity in his words, an honesty that made the vulnerability between them feel tangible. "I know what you mean," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's been a long time since I felt like this. Safe, I guess. I've spent so long hiding from everything, but I'm starting to see that maybe I can just be." Logan's smile softened, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet intensity that made Ella's breath catch. He reached for her hand, holding it gently. "You deserve to just be, Ella. You deserve to live without fear." Ella felt something shift inside her. A wall that had been built over years of betrayal and heartbreak began to crack, the pieces falling away slowly. The more time she spent with Logan, the more she realized that he wasn't trying to change her. He wasn't trying to mold her into someone else. He was letting her be exactly as she was, with all the messiness and beauty that came with it. As they continued walking, the conversation turned to her dreams. Dreams that she had buried long ago under the weight of insecurity and self-doubt. She had always wanted to start her own marketing agency, to use her creativity and skills to build something that was hers. But after everything that had happened with Sean, she had convinced herself that it wasn't possible, that she wasn't capable. "I've always wanted to do something with marketing," she said, almost to herself. "But I don't know. I guess I've been too afraid to try, too afraid that I'd fail." Logan's voice was soft but steady. "Ella, you've already taken the hardest step. You've walked away from a life that was holding you back. You've proved to yourself that you're stronger than you think. Starting your agency? That's just the next step in what you've already done." Her heart pounded as his words sank in. She had been holding herself back for so long, convinced that her dreams weren't worth pursuing. But hearing Logan say it, with so much belief in her, made something inside her stir. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe she wasn't too broken to rebuild. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted, a mix of excitement and fear swirling in her chest. Logan gave her a knowing smile. "You start exactly where you are. You have the skills, the vision, and now you have the courage. Take it one step at a time." For the first time, Ella allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to step into that future. A future where she was the one in control, where her success didn't rely on anyone else's approval. It was an overwhelming thought, but it also felt freeing. Later that evening, as they sat on the balcony of Logan's apartment, Ella realized that, for the first time in a long while, she was letting herself dream. She had spent so many years suffocating under the weight of other people's expectations. But now, with Logan's support, she felt like she could breathe again. She could dream again. The evening ended quietly, with Ella nestled against Logan as they watched the stars come out over the city. There was an unspoken understanding between them now, a connection that went deeper than words. They weren't rushing anything. They were simply letting it unfold, letting it grow in its own time. As Ella drifted off to sleep that night, a sense of peace washed over her. For the first time in years, she felt hopeful, like she was finally on the right path. But just as quickly as the hope settled in, a shadow from her past appeared, threatening to undo everything she had worked so hard to rebuild. The knock on the door in the morning would change everything. The knock on the door came unexpectedly, a harsh sound that reverberated through the stillness of Logan's apartment. Ella had been sitting on the couch, sipping a cup of tea, feeling the warmth of the evening settle around her, when the sound shattered the calm. For a split second she froze, unsure whether she had imagined it. But then the knock came again, louder this time. Logan, who had been in the kitchen finishing up a work call, walked into the living room, his brow furrowed. "Expecting someone?" he asked, his voice calm, but there was an edge to it. Ella shook her head, her heart already beginning to race. No one at all. Her mind flashed back to the day she'd walked away from Sean. She had closed the door on that part of her life, locked it away, and told herself she would never go back. But now, standing there in the quiet of Logan's apartment, she could feel the ghosts of the past starting to stir. She didn't want to face it. She didn't want to deal with it. But she knew she had to. She had to be strong enough to stand her ground. Logan walked toward the door, his movements purposeful, protective. As he opened it, Ella's heart dropped into her stomach. There, standing in the doorway, was Sean. He looked the same, but different. The confident, charming man she had once loved now appeared worn, his suit slightly disheveled, his hair messier than she remembered, but still carrying the same aura of entitlement that made her feel small. "Ella," Sean said, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "It's been a while. Can we talk?" Ella's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't seen him in months, and she wasn't prepared for this confrontation. She hadn't expected him to just show up, especially not here, not in Logan's space. "Why are you here, Sean?" she asked, her voice cold, though her heart was racing. "We have nothing to talk about." Sean stepped forward, his eyes narrowing slightly, but he didn't back down. "That's where you're wrong. We do have something to talk about. You've been avoiding me, and I've had enough of it. I've changed, Ella. I know I wasn't perfect before, but I'm different now. I want you back." Ella's stomach churned as his words hit her like a slap. "He's changed." The words echoed in her mind, but she didn't believe them. She couldn't believe them. After everything, after the emotional manipulation, after the lies, Sean couldn't possibly think she would just forget all of that. "You haven't changed, Sean," she said, her voice steady but full of bitterness. "You've always been the same. You used me, controlled me, made me feel like I was nothing without you. But I'm not that woman anymore. I don't need you." Sean's face flickered with something like hurt, but it quickly morphed into anger. "You're making a mistake, Ella. I've always known what was best for us. You just need to see it. The truth is, you've never been happy without me. You think you've moved on, but you're just running from what's real, from what's right. You and I belong together." Ella felt the weight of his words pressing down on her, threatening to break her resolve. His voice had the same manipulative edge it always had. The promises, the guilt-tripping, the endless cycle of convincing her that she was nothing without him. And for a moment, she felt the familiar tug of doubt. Maybe she had made a mistake by walking away. Maybe she was too quick to leave. Maybe he was right. But then she saw Logan standing beside her. His presence was calm, unwavering, and it reminded her of everything she had been working toward, the life she was building for herself, the peace she had started to find. Logan's steady gaze met hers, and in that moment, Ella felt a sense of clarity. I don't belong in this world anymore. Not with him, not with Sean. Logan stepped forward, his tone firm and protective. You don't have any right to come here and make her feel small again, Sean. This is over. Ella's moved on, and so should you. Sean's eyes flared with frustration as he turned to Logan. And who are you to tell me what I can and can't do? She's mine, and she knows it. Don't get in my way. Logan didn't flinch. I don't think Ella needs you anymore, and you're not welcome here. So, if you know what's good for you, you'll leave. Ella could see the battle raging inside Sean, his pride, his control, fighting against the reality that Ella was no longer his. She had been a pawn in his game for too long. But now she was standing in her own power, and he couldn't stand it. For a moment, there was silence, the air thick with tension. Then, with a final sneer, Sean turned on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Ella's heart was pounding in her chest, but a sense of relief flooded her in the aftermath. She had done it. She had faced him, stood her ground, and rejected everything he had ever tried to do to her. Logan turned to her, his eyes soft with concern. Are you okay? Ella nodded, though the emotions swirling inside her were far from settled. She felt a mix of anger, sadness, and fear. Fear of the past that kept chasing her, fear of the future that felt so uncertain. But there was something else, something stronger than fear, strength. She had made it through that moment, and she had Logan by her side. I'm fine, she said, though her voice wavered slightly. I don't know why I still let him get to me. He's not even in my life anymore, but his words still hurt. They still make me feel like I'm not enough. Logan reached out, gently placing his hand on hers. Ella, you are more than enough. You don't need him or anyone else to define you. I'm here for you, no matter what. And I'll help you make sure your past stays in the past. Ella looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. In that moment, she realized how much he had supported her, how much he believed in her, even when she couldn't always believe in herself. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you for not giving up on me. Logan smiled, his eyes soft and full of warmth. I'm not going anywhere, Ella. I'm here for the long haul. Whatever you need, I've got your back. Ella's chest tightened as she squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of his words settle in her heart. She wasn't alone anymore. And as much as her past still haunted her, it didn't define her anymore. She was stronger now, not just because of Logan, but because of herself. As the door clicked shut behind Sean, Ella's resolve strengthened. She was done with the past, and as she stood beside Logan, feeling his warmth and unwavering support, she realized that she was ready to move forward. The fear that had once held her captive was starting to fade, replaced by the possibility of a new future with Logan. But even as the door to her past closed, Ella knew that the journey ahead would not be without its challenges. She was ready to face them. She had to be. Ella had always dreamed of being her own boss, of building something that was hers, something that reflected her passion and hard work. But for so long, those dreams had felt out of reach, buried beneath the weight of self-doubt and fear. It wasn't just Sean who had held her back. There had been a part of her too that wasn't sure she could do it, that wasn't sure she was enough. But here, now, in the quiet of Logan's apartment, with his unwavering support behind her, she felt something shift deep inside. The doubts, the voices that had told her she wasn't capable, they had started to fade. For the first time in years, Ella felt free to move forward, free to take that first step into a future that she could control. Logan had always believed in her, even when she couldn't believe in herself. He had been there, not just as a partner, but as a rock, offering his support without ever pushing her to do more than she was ready for. But now, it was time for Ella to take the reins. She sat at the small desk in the corner of Logan's apartment, her laptop open in front of her. The words on the screen were a blur, but the excitement she felt in her chest made it hard to focus. The name of her agency, the vision she had been carrying for so long, was finally coming to life. It felt surreal, like stepping into a new version of herself, a version that wasn't afraid to go after what she wanted. The marketing agency she had always dreamed of starting was no longer a distant fantasy. It was happening. Logan came up behind her, placing his hand on her shoulder. She glanced up, her heart swelling with gratitude. He had always been there for her, even when she couldn't see her own potential. "You're doing it," Logan said softly, his voice full of pride. "I knew you had it in you." Ella smiled, her eyes shining. "I don't think I could have done this without you." Logan bent down, brushing his lips against her temple. "You're stronger than you realize, Ella, and I'm just here to support you." Ella felt a surge of emotion as she turned back to the screen. There, in front of her, was the beginning of something new, something real. She wasn't just building a business, she was building her life. A life that was hers, free from the shadows of her past and filled with possibilities she had never allowed herself to imagine. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Ella threw herself into her work, researching, networking, and making her vision a reality. Logan was there every step of the way, offering advice when she asked for it, but never pushing. He let her lead, and that was the most empowering part of it all. She was the one making decisions now, not waiting for someone else to tell her what to do. As her agency began to take shape, Ella felt a growing sense of purpose. She was carving out a space for herself, and the excitement that came with it was undeniable. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. But it wasn't just her career that was flourishing. Her relationship with Logan was growing too. Every moment spent together seemed to deepen their connection. They continued to talk about everything and nothing, sharing their hopes, their fears, and the little details of their days. They were building something together, not just professionally, but personally. One evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city, Ella leaned back against Logan, feeling the warmth of his body against hers. The sky above them was painted in hues of purple and gold, the city lights twinkling below like stars brought down to earth. "You know," Ella said softly, "I never thought I'd be here, with you. With everything that's happened, I never thought I'd be in a place where I could finally believe in myself again. Logan's arms tightened around her, pulling her closer. You've always had it in you, Ella. It was just a matter of giving yourself the chance to see it. Ella smiled, closing her eyes for a moment. She had spent so many years doubting herself, feeling like she wasn't enough. But now, in the quiet of Logan's embrace, with the future stretching out in front of her, she could see it. See that the woman she had become was strong, capable, and worthy of everything she was building. I don't think I would have made it this far without you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You've shown me what it means to be vulnerable, to let someone in. And it's made me believe that maybe I can have everything I've always wanted. Logan kissed the top of her head, his voice low and steady. You're not alone anymore, Ella. We're in this together. The days that followed were filled with momentum. Ella secured her first few clients, and with each new project, her confidence grew. She was no longer just a woman healing from a toxic past. She was a woman in control, building her future on her own terms. Logan's support continued to be a constant, but now it was different. Ella no longer needed reassurance. She didn't need someone to tell her she was capable. She knew it for herself. One evening, after a particularly successful pitch to a potential client, Ella walked into Logan's apartment, her face alight with excitement. I did it, she exclaimed, throwing her arms around him. I actually did it. Logan grinned, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around. I knew you could. You're incredible, Ella. Ella's heart raced with pride, but more than that, she felt something deeper. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt seen, truly seen. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Later that evening, as they sat together with a bottle of champagne to celebrate, Logan's voice broke the comfortable silence. I'm proud of you, Ella. You've come so far, and I know this is just the beginning. Ella raised her glass, a smile on her lips. I know, and I couldn't have done it without you. You've helped me find the courage to trust myself again. Logan's gaze softened, and he reached across the table, taking her hand in his. You've always had that courage, Ella. I'm just happy I could be here to watch you discover it. The connection between them deepened, not just in words but in the quiet moments they shared. They didn't need to say anything more. Their bond was clear in every glance, every touch, every shared experience. As the night wore on, Logan pulled Ella close, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that felt like the beginning of something new. It wasn't just a kiss of passion, it was a kiss of trust, of understanding, and of the shared commitment to a future they were both ready to embrace. As the evening came to a close, Ella realized that for the first time, she wasn't afraid of what the future held. With Logan by her side, she knew she could face anything. But just as they were settling into their new life, a challenge loomed on the horizon, one that would test the strength of their bond in ways they hadn't anticipated. The sun had set, casting a soft, amber glow over Charleston's skyline as Logan and Ella sat on the balcony, their fingers intertwined, the evening air warm with the promise of something new. Ella had never imagined she could feel so free, so whole. She wasn't just living for herself anymore. She was building a life with someone who truly understood her, who saw her, not for her past mistakes or scars, but for the woman she was becoming. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of growth, both professionally and personally. She had taken the first steps toward her marketing agency, her dreams finally within reach, no longer clouded by doubt and insecurity. And through it all, Logan had been her steady anchor, his support, his belief in her, unwavering. He had helped her see the strength she had within herself, and with each passing day, her confidence grew. But it wasn't just in her career that she felt transformation. Their relationship, her connection with Logan, had deepened in ways she hadn't thought possible. Every conversation, every shared moment, felt like they were building something real, something lasting. There was no rush, no pressure, just a mutual respect and understanding that made everything feel easy. Even the hardest parts of herself she had to confront. The storm of her past was starting to clear, replaced by a new kind of peace. Ella had worked through the emotional barriers, the hesitations, and the fears that had once held her back. It wasn't that she no longer had scars. They would always be part of her, part of the story that had shaped her. But she had learned to accept them, to see them as the evidence of her strength, her resilience. And with Logan, she had found someone who didn't just accept her past, but celebrated her journey. Logan turned toward her, his gaze soft yet intense, as if he were reading the unspoken thoughts behind her eyes. "You know," he began, his voice low and thoughtful, "I never believed in fate or destiny. But with you, it's hard not to." Ella raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a smile. "That's so," she teased, her voice light. He chuckled, a sound that made her heart flutter. "Yeah, I don't know if it's fate, but I know that whatever it is, I'm glad it led me to you." Ella's smile softened, and she leaned in closer, her heart full of warmth. "I'm glad it led me to you too," she whispered, her breath catching as she spoke the words that had been building in her chest for so long. The vulnerability in the air shifted, the space between them narrowing as she placed her hand gently against his chest. There were no walls between them anymore, no walls she had to hide behind. She had embraced the truth of her own journey, and now she was ready to embrace whatever came next with Logan by her side. He tilted his head down, his lips brushing against hers in a kiss that spoke of everything unspoken between them. Trust, commitment, and the hope for a future neither of them could have predicted. It wasn't just the kiss that deepened their bond. It was the promise of shared dreams, mutual respect, and unconditional love. It was a moment of complete surrender to the possibility of forever. As they pulled away, Logan kept her close, his arms around her, his touch gentle but firm, as if he were grounding her and grounding himself in the present. "We've both been through so much," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "But I believe we're stronger for it. Together." Ella closed her eyes, her forehead resting against his, feeling the weight of his words settle in her heart. She had never known love like this before. Real love. Not the love that came with control or manipulation, but the love that came with trust, with understanding, with vulnerability. The kind of love she had only ever dreamed of. "I'm ready for whatever comes next, Logan," she said softly, the words wrapping around her heart as if they were meant to be said. He smiled, his eyes filled with that quiet confidence she had come to cherish. "So am I, Ella. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." The next few weeks unfolded like a dream. Logan continued to support Ella in every way, from her marketing agency's progress to her personal healing. They worked side by side, sharing ideas, laughter, and the occasional moment of vulnerability when the weight of their pasts threatened to resurface. But through it all, their relationship was a constant source of comfort and strength. As Ella took the final steps toward launching her agency, she realized just how far she had come. From a woman lost in the shadows of an unhealthy relationship to a woman who was finally taking control of her future, she had grown in ways she never thought possible. She had finally found her voice and the courage to trust it. Logan was there, every step of the way, not just as a partner, but as someone who truly believed in her. They built their lives together, both professionally and personally, laying the foundation for a future that was theirs. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever truly was. But it was real. And it was enough. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Logan and Ella stood together on the balcony, watching the lights flicker to life below them. It was one of those quiet moments that held so much meaning. No words needed. Just the presence of the other. Ella turned to him, her eyes soft but steady. "I used to think love was something I had to fight for," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Logan smiled, his hand gently brushing the hair away from her face. "And now?" Ella's heart swelled as she looked up at him, her hand slipping into his. "Now I know that love isn't a fight. It's a choice. And I choose you, Logan. Every day." He pulled her close, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that sealed the promise they had made to each other. It wasn't just a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of understanding, of shared dreams, and of a love that had been built on trust, respect, and mutual growth. It was the kiss of a future they would face together, no matter what challenges lay ahead. As the night settled around them, Ella and Logan stood side by side, their futures intertwined in ways neither of them had expected. They had both been shaped by their pasts, their struggles, their mistakes. But together, they had created something beautiful, something real. In the quiet of the city, with the promise of tomorrow in their hearts, Ella knew one thing for certain. Love wasn't about perfection. It was about trust, about finding someone who believed in you even when you couldn't believe in yourself. And with Logan, she had found that. She had found true love. And with that, their story was only just beginning. Though they had embraced the future together, there were still unknowns that lay ahead. But no matter what life threw their way, Ella knew that as long as they had each other, they could face anything. And that, she realized, was what true love was all about.